Braden, I got to admit, man, I love that you've made an emphasis on that change in pitch because that totally changed that song. I mean, just seeing it right there, I'm like, that second part of that song is a celebration. And with the pitch change, you see it. So I was sitting there thinking, I should be thinking about my sermon right now, but that was really good. So I really like that. Many years ago, I actually just did the math over there from when I graduated high school, and whew, I'm that old. 29 years. Wow, 29 years. But when I graduated high school, I was at Sunset at the time, and when I graduated, I received the book that our seniors are actually going to receive today, the OU Places You Will Go. And it was cool at the time. I knew it was a token gift, kind of like a yearbook you get at the end of school, and everybody kind of writes in it and kind of says nice things. And of course, I was very fixated on cards and the things that were in cards. And that book just kind of always sat there. I remember every once in a while reading that book, not really thinking too much of it. But then I started my 15th year being the youth minister here at Brookline, old again, this year in February. And I realized, man, I have taught a lot through that book. I've preached the majority of these on these graduation Sundays. And I've used that book a lot. I haven't done the same sermon at all. I've bounced around in the book, and I've tried to do different things in the book. So I wanted to do something different in the book. But this year I was kind of thinking, I want to kind of do something different. I want to stop for a minute, though, because do you know how Dr. Suess actually believes he actually got his reason for his start in writing? Raise your hand if you know. It's such a trick question. Read your bulletin, people. It's in the very front page. Amy is crying somewhere right now. At the very start of the bulletin, I put it in there, but Dr. Suess, and I'll say a little more about it than the bulletin says, he was actually over 20 times he said he took this book. It's had something with Mulberry Street in it. And every time it got denied, every time. And he used the word, he was on his way home to incinerate it and move on. And it's to this, whenever he wrote about himself, he said that day, I chose to go a different way than I always walked. And he said, I went that different way and I ran into a friend of mine. So we talked for a little while. And in talking to him, he said he got to know that his friend had just become an editor. And the story of Dr. Seuss begins. You know, Dr. Seuss was very different in how he wrote. He put his beliefs, he put his worries. He wrote in such a way in which he wanted his readers to feel something. But it's even cooler because in 1954, Dr. Seuss, Theodore Seuss Geisel, was actually writing different styles of books. He was not writing children's book. In 1954, he had read an article. And in the article, it had said that it was an alarming amount of children that were in grade school that could not read. And he was just alarmed by that. I mean, how are you not able to read by the time you're in grade school? And he went on to read the article, and at the end of the article, it was giving reasons for it. And the biggest reason was that children's books were boring, that they really didn't write them for kids and for younger kids. And he thought, I want to do something different. I want to change that. I want to try to, and he took that on as his challenge. He took that on because he wanted to change the world. He wanted to change the beginning of people's worlds. He tried to illustrate very moral and just ways. He always did. He grew up in a very religious home, very devout parents, went to Christian schools even in college where he went to 2 different schools. So he always had this moral and just way about him. But the way he wrote, he was able to transcend. It's why a kid today can read it, and I can read it. Well, that probably didn't help, but somebody else could read it, and they would pull something from it. You would get something from it, and it was his style of writing. It's how he wrote. It didn't matter where you came from. It didn't matter your belief system. It didn't matter color. It didn't matter. You would read it, you would get something from it. I have one real issue, and I didn't really know I had this issue until this week, but when I was preparing to preach today, I had read over 4 or 5 different Dr. Seuss books, and I noticed every time I had a conversation after that, I was speaking in rhymes for absolutely no reason. And it was bugging me out because I really couldn't figure out, I couldn't stop it. I would just do it. I I would say things like, man, it's nice outside today. Man, we should go play. I'd be like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And I would just do it over and over. And I started to find myself making sure I didn't. So the one thing is, it's catchy. It stays with you. This year I wanted to do something different, like I said. And I wanted to do something different because we speak about that book a lot. We get that book a lot. When you graduate, you get that book. You may not even open it afterwards. It's got a great message in it, but a lot of Suess's books have great messages in it. So I thought, hey, I'm going to bounce around. I want to do a few different books. I want to show some other wisdom that Dr. Suess had, and he tried to impart on other people, his readers. The first one was the Lorax. I know a lot of people know that from the movie, maybe not even read the book when they were younger, but they remember the movie now. It's funny because most people think the Lorax was actually written as this warning against overlogging and polluting. It was like this earthly kind of book, and he was trying to warn the world. And it's funny because in an interview, he actually said, we need people to be advocates for those who can't defend themselves or speak for themselves. It wasn't about nature at all. He was writing to children, telling them to be advocates, to speak up, to do what was right. There's this repeated line from the Lorax that goes, I am the Lorax. I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. And you read it, you keep moving on, but you don't think about, hey, he's really saying something there. That one snippet is really a profound statement. The Lorax takes it upon himself to stand up for the defenseless. He stands up for those that have no tongue. I don't think we realize how true that is for us as Christians. How big of a deal that should be that we need to be doing. In Micah 6, in Proverbs 31, Micah says, "O people, the Lord has told you what is good. And this is what he requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God." In Proverbs 31, it says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for them that are being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor, the helpless, and see that they get justice." It's cool because I don't know if we do that well, that we seek out to help others that can't help themselves, or speak for those that have a hard time speaking for themselves. We look at other people and we don't see their hurting and take it on as ours. God has given us a great opportunity. Every day, it's going to sound cliche, we wake up with the opportunity to make this world a better place. We do. No matter how you look at it, you wake up this day with the opportunity to say, I'm going to make this world a better place. I don't know how many times I've heard that in my life. Books, sermons, everything else. Make the world a better place. It's such a huge task that we get scared of it. And we walk away from it rather than attacking it, making the world a better place. You know, we are called in Micah, and I love it because it uses the word requires you. It requires you. It's a little more direct when you read it that way. It's saying you do this. It's more like a job description that Micah's giving. He's trying to say who we should be, who we are called to be. Our Christian job descriptions in Proverbs 31 says, do what is right. Love mercy. Walk humbly. Speak up for those who can't. We're told to do that. That's what we're supposed to do. If we aren't doing that, we're not listening to what God is telling us to do. This is our job description. It isn't just to go to work, retire, and spend the rest of your days doing whatever. That's not our great achievement. God has called us to be a great achievement is to wake up, do what's right, love mercy, and walk humbly, and change the world. If we as Christians woke up tomorrow and we said, hey, I want to make a difference. I'm going to do one of those things as best I can today. If we woke up and really decided to do that, and I know that's been a challenge over and over before. We've heard it over and over before. I know I say that over and over before, and it also gets kind of washed away. But if we were actually able to try to fulfill the job description given by God himself, do you not think the world would change? And I know we're in trillions of people nowadays, but let's just say the auditorium. 300 people. Preacher count, 500 and something. Let's say you guys, I, decided to change the world tomorrow, or maybe today, and you're going to focus on one of those things and you're doing well. Do you not think the world would change? I know mine would change just because I tried to do that. And I pray I would succeed, but the world is hard. I always wanted to, I love those. I've only happened once, and I always kind of want it to happen. But you go through a drive-thru and you get up there to pay, and the person before you paid for yours. Isn't that like the greatest thing? Unless you like just got a coffee. But you pull up there and you get your food and you're like, oh, the person in front of you paid for it. And you're like, what did the person behind me order? No. You say, well, I want to pay for the person behind me. I've always wanted to see how the longest one went. I've always wondered that. Like it should be in print, like a challenge. What is the longest gift of a meal that McDonald's has ever had? I say that because I truly believe doing what's right, doing what's good, being humble, walking like that in the world is infectious. Like I really do. I wanted to go back later that afternoon. I did one time, a few hours later. And it wasn't going anymore. It was kind of sad. It was sad because at some point it stopped. But man, it would start again. I love those moments. The second book, probably the most popular of his books, was Green Eggs and Ham. By far the most popular. It's been made into movies and cartoons and everything else. It was one of the originals. Cool stat about it. Do you know it's been printed in 45 different languages? Most books don't even get in 10. 45 different languages. And as of this year, it's over 9 point something million copies. 9.5. It's amazing that a children's book, you would think that Dr. Seuss set out with Green Eggs and Ham. This is my chair. This is my song. I'm going to write something powerful. He had to have put so much passion into this book. Nope. It was to win a bet. He wanted to win a bet. His printer had said, I bet you can't write a book with 50 words. He said, $50, 50 words, I get to choose them. 50 different words. And Theodore decided, okay, he wanted to take it on. That's how we got Green Eggs and Ham. And he did. The story of Green Eggs and Ham I love that book. I mean, I truly do love the book. And it's amazing because it speaks to something in all of us. I truly do. Green Eggs and Ham is that one story where it says you show up and do something and you may surprise you. You may find that, hey, I like this. That's a story of Green Eggs and Ham. It's calling you out of your comfort zone. And he did. He wanted you to taste the world outside of where you're comfortable, to feel something different and maybe fall in love with it. You know, over the years, I don't know how many guys grew up with a parent. I don't know which one it is in your family. It's me and my family. But I would say, you got to try this. Try it. You got to try it. Just try it. My kids, sometimes. My wife, never. But I grew up where it's like, you got to try this. You got to try this. Even if it's doing something. Now, as a boy, I grew up with boys, and we did a lot of stupid things because you got challenged. There's sometimes in life where you knew that the other person would love this. You know their personality. This is going to be a great opportunity. I remember, sorry, I didn't plan for this to happen, but I remember taking Lael to Whitewater as a kid. She knows this story. And she wanted to ride the big slide. And of course, she's young. She's quite a bit younger. So I go up with her, and I don't like heights. I'm already getting scared walking up the stairway. I think they should figure out another way to do that. If you go down quick, you should get up quick. So I get to the top, and it's finally her turn, and you can see the excitement goes to, what have I done? And I'm like, we're not turning around. I mean, that's embarrassing. We're not doing that. So her time came, and she stepped up to do it, and I did what any good parent would do. I pushed her. I did. To this day, it's a lasting effect because she will not go to Whitewater with me. No, it's lasting because she really does have this sense, her and Jacob both, of do it. Let's do it. I want a roller coaster. Let's do it. When Jacob was young, he never wanted to do a roller coaster. He saw his sister do it, and all of a sudden it became cool. I want to do roller coasters. I love it because it's not in your comfort zone in the very beginning. I don't know anybody that their first roller coaster ride was like, woohoo. No, you freaked out the whole time until you got off. But I knew if she would just taste it, it would be amazing. Any way we can to step out of our comfort zone is what Suess was trying to get us to understand. Do life how we are called without hesitation. Step out. Taste something different. There's a man who was an elder here many years ago. His name was Cecil Harris, and his son was a scholarly man. I mean, Randy Harris was an amazing man, never married, and he had written a few books. And one of the books that has always stuck out to me, really stuck out to me, really was kind of a challenge when you got done with it, because you felt like, man, I really got to, but then you kind of talk yourself out of it because the challenge is big. But he wrote about the Sermon on the Mount, but he wanted to write it a different way. Everybody had written a scholarly account of the Sermon on the Mount. They had written about what that means, what this means, what they're called to do, and they really just kind of dug into it. But Randy, and I actually talked to him out here because he told me to read the book, he wanted to write it in a way in which it was a you can do this book. He wanted to inspire people to read the book with the idea that, hey, this is a you can do this. This is not just scholarly. He believed you could live the Sermon on the Mount. He had another writer or another friend who read a lot, and he said they actually got into a constant conversation where they check on each other to see how they were doing living the Sermon on the Mount. That's amazing because I've read, seen everything about the story on the Mount, but I don't know if I've ever really challenged myself to live the Sermon on the Mount. It was just too big, too hard, too much. But the reality is it's not. It's the first step maybe out of our comfort zone. Do you think it was hard for the disciples to walk with Jesus? I mean, we always talk about that first moment they were called, what they had to give up, what they were walking away from in their own comfort zones of leaving their work, their status, their families, money, safety. Just to walk with Jesus, not knowing. I mean, they hadn't seen it before. Nobody knew what this was going to be like. But that first moment they had to walk with Jesus. Their time with Jesus wasn't easy. A few days in, maybe not so hard, trying to get a taste of it. A few months have gone by, and they're realizing, hey, I don't know if this is what I signed up for. It's becoming harder, more challenging. Years now, falsely arrested, beaten, stoned, mocked, thrown out of cities, even their home cities. I'm so glad they stepped. I'm so glad they took that moment and that opportunity to say, I want to do this. And they took the challenge. In Dr. Suess's, the Sneetches, there's these characters. He always has characters in his book. The Sneetches are these yellow bird-like creatures, and they live on a beach. Great life to have. But the problem with the Sneetches are that there's two different groups. The ones that have the stars on their belly and the ones that don't. And the whole book goes on with the ones that do not have the stars on their bellies, trying to come up with ways to have a bigger star, a better star. They're going through all these funny ways of doing it. Of course, it doesn't always go well. The story goes that the Sneetches tried so many different ways, but it came down to, in the end, they finally came together. And they had this simple truth at the end of the story. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, or Snetches are Snetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. It's funny, that's so Dr. Seuss. But it's also huge. Once again, we're challenged by Seuss to do something different, to live something different. He wanted to show that appearances truly do not matter. Isn't it crazy how much time and effort we put into appearance? And I'm not even talking about getting up looking good today or any of those kind of things, but just on the appearance of who we are and what we are. I mean, we put so much time and effort into it. Meaningless effort sometimes. I mean, how much time do we put comparing ourselves to other people? How much time just this week have you compared yourself to a coworker, a spouse, to people who work with your children, who just somebody else that looked better than? I mean, so many things that we just constantly are comparing. On the other side of that, I wonder how many interactions I haven't had. Interactions that could have been this life-changing interaction, an interaction that could have been so just eye-opening for me, but I didn't have that interaction. You know why? Because the other person's appearance. And I dismissed it. I wonder how many times that has not happened for me. God sees each of us through the eyes of unconditional love. And we need to know he loves everyone. We're called to love as God loves. It doesn't matter what they do, the work they have, the money they have, the education they have, and especially not what they look like. Those things just do not matter. In the eyes of God, none of that. I don't believe on that day when we all face him, he's going to say, man, you did great in business. It's not going to matter. Man, you look good in your 30s. It's not going to matter. That's not at all what God is going to be looking at and how he knows us. We need to do the same. We need to be able to look at people with this concept of love. And that is a huge challenge. Huge challenge. It is for me. We need to learn to see people as God sees them, and not just the ones we like. That's easy. Not just the ones we get along with. Or maybe it's just the ones that are in the group that we like, because the other group we don't. And we can't even talk to them. Jesus, hanging on the cross, showed compassion to those of his followers. He showed compassion to his family. He showed compassion to those in the crowd that were crying, devastated by what was happening. He showed compassion to those that beat him. He showed compassion to those that stripped him, that ridiculed him, that mocked him. He showed compassion on those that would be putting him to death. He showed compassion, even while hanging, bloody and broken, facing the people who had done this to him. Forgive them. That's powerful. To be able to see people that way. And that's our example. That's a beautiful, powerful message. Well, I'm going to finish up, and I'm going to speak about, the places you will go. I'm going to try to do a different point, but it's such a good book. If you get it today, senior, you will get it today. Read it. I mean, really, read it. And if you don't have the book, go read it. You may say, I don't even know what that book says. I don't remember that book. It's such a good book. It doesn't matter if you're 8 or 80. Such a good book. If you could go back, you can go back in time and you can tell yourself one thing. You had the opportunity where you could go back and say something, do something, whatever it may be, but you had one thing. Would you go back and tell yourself to do this? Don't do that. Choose differently on this. Stay away from that. Maybe you give them stock tips. Give them the lottery numbers in 20 years. Thinking that money would be the fix. What I think I like best about Suess and the places you will go, is I feel like it's Suess's way of going back. When you read the book, he really gets into it. And it feels like he's actually given himself advice through the eyes of children. He doesn't deny the messiness. I really like that book. There's a huge section in there that goes into this, and it's one that we never talk about, and I wanted to talk about it. It says, you'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with great care and tact, and remember that life's great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up the right foot with your left. It's cool because I don't know how many times I've read the book, I've gone over the book, I've preached about the book, I've taught about the book. I mean, I like Dr. Seuss. Never did I fixate on that one. It was kind of down. There's so much good, happy But life is messy. Satan is the king of mess. And he makes life messy. Back early on, before the greatest invention ever, which is maps on the iPhone. If you don't believe that, drive without it in a city you don't know. But before that, they had the little thing you put up on your dash, and it was a GPS. Some of you guys don't know what that is. And I would wager many of us have discovered the hard way that we think we know better than the GPS. So all of a sudden it says, go this way, and we say, oh, I know a faster way. I know a better way. And then we're like, I don't know where I'm at. We think we know better than that GPS. It's easy to think we know best, even how to live our own life. And God is saying no. He wants us to follow him in how we live our life. Follow him in how we make our decisions. In the Old Testament, the prophet Isaiah was speaking to the Israelites as they too were struggling with God's way again. As right as the concept of trusting. They had the opportunity again to trust him. It was so hard. The prophet says, the Lord will guide you continually. He will give you water when you're dry. He will restore your strength. And I love the big one, the emphasis. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. God always gives, and he gives more abundantly than we can ever imagine. It's sad that we don't always realize that until maybe it's even too late, how abundant we've been given to, and the abundant grace that we've been given. Once again, the Lord is actually making a promise here in the type of language he's using. This is a promise, once again, he's given to the Israelites, saying, if you, and he's going on to say, the waters will be great. Your gardens, I mean, think of how important that is. To us nowadays, we got Walmart. But think how important was the gardens were to them. He said, your gardens will be plentiful, overflowing. No matter where we go, we're given a great choice. Who, what will guide us. It's crazy because God loved us even that much to say, I'll give you the free choice. You can choose. That's an amazing amount of love. As a parent, when your kids are getting that age, you know it's a great amount of love to be able to say, okay, I want you to do what you do. And step away from what you think they should do. Choose today and every day to let the Lord be your guide. To let the Lord be your GPS. To let the Lord be the one who helps you make decisions when they're huge. It's so sad how many huge decisions in my life I had to make, and I waited till the night before I started to pray. I just missed the help that God was wanting to give me. The book, Oh You Places We'll Go, will end with this, and I think it's crazy fitting that it ends this way because this is the only book that Suess ever wrote that he actually didn't get to see in print because he had died about 6 months after he had finished it. Oh, the places you will go. It kind of changes the book a little bit whenever you read it. But this is how the book ends. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. Get on your way. Our mountains are waiting, people. The Lord has provided a great ministry, a job description. Let's get on our way. Let's step out of our comfort zone and do those things. I think this is a great thing for seniors that are graduating, but it's 47, and I feel like I need to do it, even now. Thank you for being here. Graduates, this is your day. We'll emphasize with you, but I thank everybody for being here because I do think there's a greater reason we come together. We come together this morning, we're assembling because we have the opportunity to worship the God that we follow. We worship the God who is trying to give us the opportunity to see and become. But he's also given us the opportunity to choose everlasting life. He's given us that opportunity this morning to choose to be a redeemed child of God. He's given us that opportunity, but it's ours. We get to choose. We get to choose to be wholly loved and completely forgiven. If we can bring you into Christ this morning, we can introduce you to the waters of baptism. We can introduce you to who Christ is. You know what it's about. We want you to do that. So many people in there. If you don't know how to do it, just tell them how you did it. To me, that's one of the greatest things, is to just tell them your own testimonial. And tell them your own testimonial. Don't get scared off by your own testimonial. Tell them your own testimonial. Sometimes that speaks the loudest. Or maybe you're here this morning and your GPS is taking you off course. Maybe it's taking you away that it seems like a whole lot longer. You don't feel like you're getting anywhere. Maybe this morning you're like, maybe this morning the GPS just didn't work, and maybe you just need to return. You need to go back to God and say to God, hey, I did it wrong and I'm ready to do it right. Anything we could do for you this morning, we'd love for you to come. Stand and sing.
They tried my Lord.